Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here on Potomac Watch with Kyle Peterson and Kim Strassel. And let's turn to Chris Christie, who also unveiled his campaign this week, the former two-term New Jersey governor, unsuccessful candidate for president in 2016, lost to Donald Trump. Then he dropped out after New Hampshire. He endorsed Donald Trump and tried to be something of an advisor to Trump, but has turned against former president in the wake of January 6th. Let's listen to one of his points when he announced this week.
The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump. If we don't have that conversation with you, we don't deserve to ask for your vote. We don't deserve the mantle of leadership. We don't deserve to have you think of us as people worthy of leadership.
Kim, a direct and pointed attack on one Donald J. Trump and his record. I guess the question is, one, give him credit for being so direct when I think so many others of the GOP candidates are treating Donald Trump very gingerly. They want to wrest the nomination from him, but they don't want to attack him directly. And Christie's willing to do that, as was Pence, somewhat over the issue of January 6th. But Christie's really going to take it to him. And he said explicitly, I'm going to take on Trump, and I'm going to do it because you have to beat Trump to get the nomination. And I'm going to do that. What do you make of his pitch?
At a 2-hour town hall event where he made that official announcement, he said, I'm going out there to take out Donald Trump. The gloves are already off. In another interview he did, he called him lonely, self-consumed, self-serving mirror hog. Also called him a spoiled baby. He's not going to hold back in any way. To me, the interesting question will be, how does he do it? Because I think if you're going to go after Donald Trump on some of the talking points of the left, you aren't going to necessarily gain any traction because a lot of conservative voters are wary of those. They read them in the media every day. And they will want to hear something from Christie that makes a better point about why Donald Trump shouldn't be president again. I mean, Chris Christie said this is not a kamikaze run. He's not a paid assassin. That he's doing this because he wants to win and he doesn't want Donald Trump to win. We'll see if he can get that hearing because voters are also going to want to hear why he should win. And I think that's a challenging thing for Christie, having been out of politics for a while. He does have his record as New Jersey governor where he wasn't able to turn the state red, but he did accomplish some things while he's there. But it does feel as though one of his main rationales for being in here is simply to kneecap the guy who is in front.
His achievements as governor included a property tax cap, a cap on the increase in property taxes, which were soaring in New Jersey. And he got that through a Democratic legislature, a cap. He also made some modest pension reforms, though that hasn't taken care of all of the state's considerable pension problems. He also gave the state an 8-year respite from higher taxes, and that's no small thing in a state like New Jersey. But of course, he was undone in part in terms of his approval rating by Bridgegate, the fact that some of his aides at the time were found out to have blocked traffic over the George Washington Bridge, which if you live in the New York area, you know can be a massive inconvenience to commuters. And they had blocked traffic because they were trying to get back at a mayor who wasn't supporting them to the extent they thought he should be. Chris Christie said as governor he didn't know what they were doing, but the episode redounded to his detriment anyway politically, and he had a much less successful second term. So that becomes an issue, will be an issue if he hits the stage. So let's turn to our third candidate, Doug Burgum, North Dakota governor, highly successful software entrepreneur, very rich. You would think of North Dakota as a hotbed of computer technology entrepreneurship, but there it was. He made a name for himself there, now as governor. Let's listen to his pitch.
We need a leader who understands the real work that Americans do every day. Someone who's worked alongside our farmers, our ranchers, and our small business owners. Someone who's held jobs where you shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning. Someone who's got decades of success selling our technology overseas and knows the threats and the risks to our future from foreign state-sponsored competitors stealing and pirating our intellectual property. To unlock the best of America, we need a leader who's clearly focused on three things: economy, energy, and national security.
Economy, energy, national security, all three highly important, but missing there, the cultural issues, Kyle. Pointedly so. He also implicitly agreed with current New Hampshire Governor Christie in suggesting that Republicans need to move beyond the culture divisions in the country and focus on issues like this. I have to say, I really liked the delivery of Burgum. I like the energy. I like the enthusiasm. I thought there was a winning part of his personality there that I think came through. What do you make of this argument that to focus on, to duck or to avoid, maybe duck is unfair, but certainly to avoid the cultural disputes that are animating the Trump campaign, the DeSantis campaign, the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign?
Well, I think Doug Burgum is going to have to make it a case to voters that he can play in that sandbox as well. And I think he does have, in his defense, some record to that effect. I don't think he is personally much of a culture warrior, but he signed a bill, for example, to ban critical race theory teaching in K-12 schools. I believe he signed an abortion bill as well. And so if he gets questioned about that, I think he can say, look at my record, I've done those things. But I do agree with you that one of his best assets is this Midwest authenticity. He doesn't come off like a politician. He comes off like a guy who's from a small town who started a company that turned successful, sold to Microsoft for about $1 billion, and then decided to run for governor. So he's now in his second term as governor. I think he could talk a lot about economics, about how to make a state successful, trying to push North Dakota to get on a path to zeroing out its income tax. Obviously, a great story about fossil fuels there, but also he has supported carbon capture and sequestration. The biggest challenge, I think, for him is that a lot of people haven't heard from him. He does have that personal wealth. So if he is willing to write a check to get some ads in some of these early states, maybe he can get on some people's radar. But the challenge is to make that first debate stage in August. The Republican National Committee has said you need 1% in polling and 40,000 individual donors.
Right. In the next 2 months isn't going to be easy to get for some of these guys.
Which is not easy to get. And you can only imagine that in future debates, the RNC will only increase those figures, try to ratchet them up as they are winnowing the field. And so the challenge for Burgum, I think, is to hit those figures and get out there fast enough and strong enough that he can get a place on the stage where he can really try to make his case at length and get the attention of people who haven't heard of him yet.
Yeah, and it's not merely getting on the debate stage, Kim. It's also breaking out of the lower single-digit polling. And we're now getting a much bigger field than I think some people thought we would get. I mean, you have Asa Hutchinson, who's competing, also a former governor of Arkansas. Vivek Ramaswamy is in. Of course, DeSantis and Trump are the biggest candidates in the polls so far. Nikki Haley, former South Carolina governor, and Tim Scott, South Carolina senator. More nationally well known, and Ramaswamy has his own money. Those other candidates have more solid donor bases. Haley, I think, has claimed she has enough donors to get onto the debate stage. So it's going to be very hard for each of these individuals to break through. And Iowa is the key place for them, I think, in particular for Pence and his cultural issues, but not Christie. Christie is going to play in New Hampshire. That's where he's going to try to make a big breakthrough, as he did last time. But if you don't play in Iowa and you don't finish in the top three there, you miss that chance for a boost in New Hampshire.
Yeah, one thing I would say about this field, that as crowded as it is, it does feel at this point as though it mostly is set. in that we've had some other people who have already announced that they're not getting in. So former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Christie, the governor of New Hampshire, Senators Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz. And so we've got that. The one that is still out there that's a big unknown is whether or not Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin might jump in at a later point. That might depend on how elections go there in his state, if that's not too late, although, for that to happen. But yes, this is a crowded field, just like it was in 2016. And these guys are going to have to play in Iowa. They're going to have to meet those criteria because those first debates are going to matter a lot too. That is when Republicans are going to start paying attention, and it's going to set the stage for those ratcheting criteria for the subsequent debates as well. And then, of course, the other big question that Republicans are going to have to confront this year, we've said this before, but it's worth saying again, is that if you get to the end of this year and you are not polling and you are not in it for the win, then they've got to consider getting out, because there's a lot of concern that otherwise, with a candidate field that large, you once again split the field and Donald Trump has the clear path to the nomination.
Each of these candidates is also making a couple of bets on what might happen that could create a more open field. The first thing is that they don't think that Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, has consolidated the opposition support for Donald Trump. That's one thing. So they think that there's a chance that if Trump and DeSantis bash each other to death, that they can run as the third candidate, come in on the outside and be the alternative. That's one bet they're making. The other bet, I think, is Trump's legal risk, Kyle. He's already been indicted by Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, on what I think are dubious charges, but nonetheless, the indictment is there. There's likely to be a trial. Jack Smith, the special counsel investigating Trump on two issues, the handling of documents at Mar-a-Lago and on the January 6th role. We don't know to what extent where those stand, though there's a lot of news reporting now that there might be an indictment coming on the document handling, and then there's the Georgia grand jury related to also to the election. So assumption is maybe these indictments come down, knock Trump out, or so diminish him in the eyes of voters that the field becomes a lot more wide open.
Right, and it is really hard to predict how those indictments would affect Republican views of Donald Trump. Notable that the Alvin Bragg indictment in New York seems to have given Trump a polling bounce, if anything, and rallied Republicans to his side. And so part of the difficulty is we haven't seen the indictments yet. We don't know what the evidence is. Maybe if they are stronger than the Alvin Bragg indictment, some Republicans will be persuaded by them, or at least enough to sort of shake up the state of the campaign. The other question is just timing and how this all plays out, how these candidates react to that, because they're all going to be asked in Iowa, in New Hampshire, would you pardon Donald Trump on the federal charges at least? They're already sort of discussing that. Christie had a nice joke. He said, to accept a pardon, you have to admit guilt. And so I know I'm never going to be actually in that position, implying that Donald Trump would never do that. I don't know. It's hard to predict. It's a big X factor. But Republicans also may just be persuaded that even if they think these are unfair charges or this is a continuation of a campaign to get Donald Trump, that's what the next 4 years are going to be like if they elect him. And so Ron DeSantis has been pushing that argument a little bit, and I don't know if it'll be persuasive, but it seems like he's given it his best go.
All right, let's just briefly, Kim, give an update to listeners about the shutdown of the House by a dozen or so Republicans who backbenchers blocked a rule, a measure that would oppose a gas stove regulation from the Obama administration. I think the leaders had to decide not to bring that to the floor. And then Kevin McCarthy sent the entire House home until next Tuesday, because he couldn't conduct any real business in the interim because he doesn't have a majority. And these senators are upset about the debt ceiling deal. But what do they want from McCarthy? And is it possible for him to appease them?
Yeah, the short version is that it's unclear exactly what they want. They're angry, obviously, over last week's debt ceiling deal. They felt as though he didn't negotiate a good enough one with the White House. That obviously most of them voted against it, and that bill only passed in the end because of Democratic support. There is some claim by some of them that McCarthy supposedly made some agreement with them back during the speakership fight, saying that he would hold the line on making sure that spending levels were returned to fiscal 2022 levels. He is disputing that any such agreement was made, and who knows? He said, I would try to get as close as I can. And by the way, I mean, it does seem unlikely that he would promise such a thing because he wouldn't be able to deliver on such a thing. Any negotiation with the White House is going to be a negotiation. But a lot of this just seems to be grandstanding, I have to say, and a little bit of a temper tantrum. And the question now is where it goes, because I think it could go one of two ways. One way is that he sent people home, cool off tempers, have some more discussions. He makes some promises to do some continued work on these conservative priorities they have, whether that might be one thing, for instance, is actually drawing up appropriations bills that are even lower than the caps. He came out and said that, that is a ceiling, not a floor. We could go lower than that. The other thing, though, is that tempers continue to fray and these guys continue to block the agenda, or they even call for a motion to vacate the chair, and McCarthy is at risk. He's got such a narrow majority. So this, once again, a test of his ability to bring together a very wide-ranging caucus when he does not have a lot of margin for error.
I think the Republicans, all of them, have to decide in the House if they want to govern as a majority or they're going to be a dysfunctional minority that's going to turn things over to the Democrats in 2 years. All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you all for listening. We're back every day with another edition of Potomac Watch. Thanks for listening.